Good evening. I'm Andre Ash, digital anchor here at Real Times Media. We're coming to you live from our Studio 1452 studio headquarters. Thank you so much for joining us for our All Eyes on Georgia election coverage. This is the race that everyone has been talking about, and it essentially all comes down to this and how the official and final makeup of the Senate will be. And we have some great guests who will be joining us live. Real Times Media brings you this production of our All Eyes on Georgia coverage right here, right now, live. And joining us to bring you part of that coverage is Adrienne Shropshire. Adrienne Shropshire. She is the executive director at Black PAC. We also have Donnell Suggs. He's the editor-in-chief of Atlanta Voice. And we also have Brandon Bryce. He is the host of the Bryce is Right podcast, conservative commentator, and we also have our A.R. Shaw, who will be joining us in just a moment, executive editor of the Atlanta Daily World. So let's get straight to it. Adrienne, you've had quite the role when it comes to getting out the vote and the efforts that's happening on the ground in Atlanta. Talk to us about what this moment means right now, this runoff, because you've got over 2 million people who have already early voted. What does that say to you about how this race is going to shape up tonight?
Well, I think both here in Atlanta and around the state, quite frankly, I was out, knocking on doors with our teams across Atlanta on Friday, in Columbus on Saturday, and Savannah yesterday. And there's just a tremendous amount of energy and excitement in the community. I was saying to some of our canvassers that it really feels like there is more energy now than there was even for the general. And so one of the things that I think our teams felt good about was that, when you're canvassing, you have a little, you have a list that's on your iPod or on your phone, and each day it'll tell you who's voted, right? So not to go to that door because you don't want to bother anyone anymore, because we've been knocking on their doors for months. And so they just say, don't go to that person, they've already voted. And so what was really encouraging and heartening was that there were whole neighborhoods across the state. And when I mean neighborhoods, I mean blocks and blocks of people who had already voted. And so when we think about that early vote numbers, those record-breaking days, and we think about today, the clarity that Georgia's voters have, the commitment that folks have to, being good stewards of our democracy, to being really clear what is in the best interest of Georgia in terms of who represents Georgia's voters, and particularly Georgia's Black voters. People have really risen to the occasion. I think that, you see it on the ground. Our canvassers were excited today. They felt good about what they've been hearing. I think today's people will be, take that energy into the results.
Right, and we have on the ground live footage of the Warnock's campaign in Atlanta, and we're going to go to both of our correspondents who joins us on the ground from the headquarters of Warnock in just a moment. Brandon, I know that you've got a lot to say about this race. Speaking from a conservative point of view, I want to get that in just a moment, but just for a live feel of what's happening on the ground and what the energy of what the Warnock campaign is hoping and expecting for tonight. We're going to first go live to our A.R. Shaw. He is the executive editor for our sister station down in Atlanta, Atlanta Daily World. A.R., what is the vibe that you're getting right now? What are you hearing from the Senator Warnock campaign as far as what they're expecting tonight?
Yeah, what's interesting, I actually just bumped into Senator Warnock. He's outside of the Atlanta Marriott, and he was with some family members. Very upbeat. Everybody, people are still trickling in. It's real early. They're very confident. There's a very confident, mood here tonight. They feel that they're gonna pretty much, from just hearing everyone speak, they feel like there's going to be something that's going to be not close. They don't think it's going to be close. So we're going to keep an eye on the numbers, but I think just from the vibes here, people think that this is going to be a runaway victory for Warnock.
Yeah, thanks, AR. And for a little bit more of on the ground perspective, let's also talk to Donnell Suggs. We're partnering with the Atlanta Voice. He's the editor in chief. So we appreciate you being on the ground. What is it that you are looking at? What is it that your readership, reader followers have been looking at? What are some of the things that you're following tonight?
Well, they're looking for a story that's not going to post at 2 o'clock in the morning like it did the last time we were here. So AR is right. The vibe here is a little bit more, I wouldn't say celebratory, but it definitely isn't as tense. I'm hoping that, I know I've spoke to a lot of readers that want to see if they can get a story on what happened sometime around 9 or 10 o'clock. And as someone that was here at 2 o'clock in the morning last time around, I'd like to be able to post that story at a reasonable hour. So we'll hope for the best.
Right. I know that's right. But Brandon, there has been a lot of different storylines as it relates to this race between Senator Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. From your point of view, where do you see this race shaping up tonight? Why Senator Warnock, as a current senator, why wasn't he able to lock it in the first time around? Why are we at this runoff? Tell us your state of the race from your perspective, Brandon.
So first of all, I think it's interesting to look at and separate Georgia from Atlanta. Atlanta, is the civil rights home. It's a blue community, blue city. But Georgia is not. When you talk about Georgia, they care about two things: God and football. And what's ironic, that's what's on the ballot today. You have a Herschel Walker who, unfortunately, name recognition matters. And Georgians know Herschel. They know him from UGA, which is a big community. They know him just from being a Heisman Trophy winner. They know him, and they think some Georgia voters said that this is the guy who they trust when it comes to being honest with the voter. Now, the flip side to that is you look at Warnock. This is a guy who's also got, he's the pastor of a very prominent church, Dr. King's Church, so that has votes. Being a pastor in the Bible Belt also matters when it comes to Georgia voters. And then the other thing is that now you're talking about a guy who in the Senate has literally voted 96% of the time. The problem with that is most Georgians are not in favor of the guy who's in the White House right now. So it's a catch-22 when you're saying, I think the thing that keeps Warnock afloat is the fact that he's a pastor in a Bible Belt state. And so far, there haven't been any real major scandals that are impacting voters. But at the end of the day, and I go back to the numbers, Georgia is God and football. And right now, when you look at the average Georgia voter, Stacey Abrams found this out, the average Georgia voter may not necessarily think or vote the same way Atlanta voters vote. So tonight's going to be interesting.
And to that point, Adrian, does Brandon make any good points on as far as the makeup of Atlanta and Georgia? And what does it say about where Georgia voters are and not really locking in the vote for Senator Warnock the first time around?
Sure. I mean, yes, that is an accurate point. I mean, Georgia as a whole is not Atlanta. When we think about South Georgia in particular, and obviously North Georgia, right? Very different sense of priorities, very different, sense of, what is important, both in terms of policy and issue substance, but also in terms of, what people are looking for in a leader, right? In political leadership. But I will say, the thing that I will say is that Raphael Warnock already won this race during the primary. Now, we all know that we are only here because of a frankly, racist rule that forces a runoff historically. So that's how we're here. But if that rule didn't exist, Raphael Warnock would have already won. And that means that the voters of Georgia, the entire state, not just Atlanta, chose him in the primary. And so nothing has changed. I also agree that there hasn't been anything that has changed substantively in the race that would make that outcome any different. So I think part of when we think about, how people showed up, when we think about, particularly, I think the kinds of things that Reverend Warnock has talked about on the campaign trail, those are the same things that we have heard people talk about when we've knocked on their door. So when we ask people, what are the most important issues to you? Yes, they say jobs and they say the economy. They also talk about access to healthcare and the costs of healthcare. People are concerned about gun violence and the need for someone to do something about gun violence beyond what the Senate has already done. People are aware of the legislation that Senator Warnock has worked on, and that legislation represents issues that they feel very strongly about. They also feel very strongly and are motivated by the issue of voting rights. They feel very strongly and are motivated by the issue of women's reproductive choice and the sort of—
And to that point, Adrian, I want to come back to AR and Donnell on the ground in just a moment. But Brandon, has Democrat Raphael Warnock done enough to secure another term in Congress?
Well, it depends. Again, I go back to there's what the senator has said and there's what the senator has actually done. Again, when you look at voting 96% along with Joe Biden, this president, whether you like him or not, statewide, as far as Georgia, he's not really that popular. And so the voter today will determine if those issues like health care or reproductive rights, if those issues like the economy, if those issues like safety, which those were the top two issues when they actually polled it nationally, that's going to determine if Georgia voters are going to send Senator Warnock back to Washington. What I would suggest is, in the conversation, what I've noticed is that he did not campaign in many times with the president because of that unpopularity. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what Georgia voters do. Again, it's going to come out. Are Georgia Republicans going to come out and vote? If they stay home, the senator wins. If they come out, it could be a very different story tonight.
Adrian, do you believe, just from your perspective, has Raphael Warnock done enough to secure another term? And has President Biden been an issue for Democrats on the ballot?
I mean, I will say again that, Senator Warnock garnered the majority of votes from Georgia voters already. And they voted for him, even though that language is out there about how many times he voted with Joe Biden, et cetera, et cetera. I think that people are aware of that, and they still voted for him on November 8th. Again, I don't think anything has changed. I do believe, I agree with Brandon that there is this question of, do Republicans turn out? I don't think right now, at least what I've seen, that we're seeing surges in places that would need to surge for Herschel Walker. And I think the other question, though, if we look at those voters who switched tickets, right, voted for Kemp, voted for Warnock, I think the other question is not just do they come back out, but do they come back out and those Republicans and opt to vote for Raphael Warnock again, as they did in the primary? So he's clearly done enough because the majority of Georgians voted for him already. And I think that they are making a real distinction between him and whatever their concerns are with President Biden, because as we've heard, people simply believe that Warnock is good for the state of Georgia. They're not looking for his broader national, position. They're looking for what he will do and what he will bring back and what he will deliver for the people of Georgia.
Andre,
and I'm about to get to you, Brandon. AR, I know, is on the ground. Donnell is on the ground in Atlanta at Warnock's headquarters. AR, I know there's got to be somebody in that crowd. I know you're there too, Donnell. But there's got to be somebody in that crowd we can talk to. We can get them on standby. But I do want to follow with Brandon in just a moment. I'll come back to AR. But Brandon, to that point, to follow up on the dynamics of what this race has presented between Senator Warnock and Herschel Walker. Go ahead, Brandon.
It's simple math. This election will come down to the counties. The counties in Georgia, if you've never lived in Georgia, I lived in Georgia a while back. The counties have a lot of power in Georgia, and if the counties turn out, we could see an upset tonight. If the counties, again, like I mentioned before, if they don't turn out, then we could probably see the senator returning back to Washington. But here's what's interesting. When we look at these elections, both of these candidates, again, like I said before, God in football, they represent two different factions in the state of Georgia. Georgia is a Bible state, a Bible belt, which essentially means that are the religious voters going to come out and vote? If that's the case, Warnock wins. But we also look at the middle class. Are white males going to turn out? If that's the case, Herschel Walker can win. So it's really going to be interesting to see who's going to turn out. Are the religious groups going to turn out, or are white male voters going to turn out in this election? And that's going to be the determinant of who.
But in your eyes, Brandon, as a conservative commentator, you have your own show, host of the Brandon, the Bryce is Right show podcast. From your perspective, do you see Herschel Warnock, has he presented on policy issues as he talked about in the campaign? Has there anything that you've heard from his mouth and his policy stance that's worth him being elected as the senator representing the state of Georgia?
Andre, I don't think that's the right question. I think the right question for this race is, are Georgia voters done with the Biden administration? And if they're not, then they're going to send Warnock back to Washington. If they are, it's going to be a very different story come 2 a.m.
But wouldn't the candidate also have something to offer themselves as far as what they will bring to the table? Or is it just only a vote against Joe Biden? What about the candidate himself?
Both candidates bring a very different perspective. I think the thing about Warnock that's interesting is Warnock.
Oh, no. What about Herschel Walker? What does he bring to the table in your eyes from a conservative point of view?
Well, I think Herschel Walker's really perspective is around small business. He talks a lot about business owners really being not getting what they deserve under this administration. He talked a lot about policing, which is another big issue that's going to play a big role of, do Georgians feel safe in their own state? To that credit, I think with Warnock, one of the things he's done well is really been sensitive on the policing issue. And so again, when we talk about who are the three groups that are going to determine tonight's winner, it's going to be the faith-based community. It's going to be law enforcement, which is a big, major vote in Georgia. And it's going to be white male voters who are going to determine who's going back to Washington.
Adrian, does Brandon make a point, or does Warnock should Herschel Walker even be in this race at all? From your perspective, does Brandon make a point?
Well, I think that voters are looking. And we've heard, you all have heard, certainly we've seen good reporting on what voters are looking for. And so there is the one side that is the policy issue, and that has to do with people's real day-to-day lives, right? Do they have access to healthcare, right? Do they feel like that there's economic opportunities for them and their families? Do they feel like their children are getting a good education? Do they feel like they feel safe? And I will say that on the public safety issue, what we've heard from people really is not just a broad public safety or crime issue. They are deeply concerned about gun violence and the increase in gun-related crimes. And what they want is solutions for illegal guns on the street, right? And so the question then becomes not just, are you supporting law enforcement, is do you have a plan to get illegal guns off the street? And I think that is their real policy distinctions between these two candidates. I also think that the other piece there's the policy piece and the issue piece, but there's also a question of character. And that is what is helping to shape and drive voters to the poll as well. And we've heard voters even today say that they're making a choice that is fundamentally about the characters of these two candidates. And certainly for the voters that we're talking to, Black voters, they just simply cannot abide Herschel Walker. They do not appreciate Republicans feeling like they can impose their version of a Black leader on the Black community. And they are embarrassed by him. And so I just think that there's a character decision that voters are making, and there's a policy decision. And Herschel Walker is coming out for the most part, and not just for Black voters, but for many voters, regardless of what demographic they fall into. He's coming out on the wrong side of that on both of those issues, both policy and character.
Adrienne Shropshire, Executive Director of Black PAC, thank you so much for your time. We know that you have a hard stop and have other engagements this evening. It will be a long night, and we'll be watching the results as they come in. Thank you so much, Adrienne, for your time. We appreciate it. To join us more for On the Ground Perspectives, we're going to first turn to our executive editor once again of the Atlanta Daily World, AR. What are you finding on the ground? From you and Danielle might as well get on the same camera together, because. But what are you seeing on the ground? What are you hearing? Any voters lining up yet?
So what's happening now is that people are actually going through the security lines along, which is a good sign, because people are actually coming out. They believe that Warnock is going to take it to victory tonight. So the security lines along, as you can see in the back of me, there aren't many people thus far, but in say 10, 15 minutes, it's going to be full. It's going to be packed. I just went outside and I looked at the line. The line is stretched around the corner for security. So once everyone gets into the line, gets through security, this room will be packed. They're going to have a DJ. They have a DJ booth on the side. I actually just saw Spike Lee. Spike Lee is here. I'm going to try to catch up with him at some point. But yeah, it's this. I think this is. I think the mood is very festive. I think people are very confident about tonight. As Adrienne mentioned before, Warnock won the first time, and they think that it's going to be a blowout victory tonight.
Yeah, and you also have been doing some campaign reporting from, President Obama coming in town to campaign for Warnock. What have you been seeing on the ground leading up to tonight's election as well?
Yes, President Barack Obama came to Atlanta a few days ago. Made a real profound speech and basically just laid it all out, that Herschel Walker isn't a candidate that's prepared for this position. And he made it plain and clear that Herschel Walker isn't prepared. And I think we've seen this. And even, I know Brandon has mentioned some of the policies that Herschel Walker has put forth, but unfortunately, Herschel Walker has basically taken the air out of the room with all of the nonsensical talk and a lot of the viral moments that hasn't really made him or the Republican Party look good. So, regardless of any policy that he's put forth, it's being drowned out by a lot of the viral moments that have pretty much silenced anything that he's put forth in terms of policy.
Yeah, let's get to Donnell Suggs, the editor-in-chief of the Atlanta Voice. What's the move now, and what have you also been watching the lead up to tonight's election? What has been the energy on the ground?
Well, I'm on the media side, so it's obviously a little more jovial on this side because folks know that they're at the end of the race and they're walking around and just kind of setting up and what have you. And we're just kind of getting to the end of this thing. Brandon made some great points. AR made some great points. I don't think this race is going to be as much of a blowout as a lot of people are thinking, though. I don't think so. I think that there was 82,000 votes that went to a libertarian candidate who's not running. So those votes have to go somewhere. I don't think all 82,000 people are not going to vote. So I feel like we're going to be here a little longer than 8, 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Yeah, and from media on the ground, what has been the outlook as far as Black media on the ground and the perspective of how this race is shaping up from a Black media perspective?
Well, thank God for the Atlanta Voice and the Atlanta Daily World, because I don't think there's any other Black media here. And we've been the ones that have been keeping track of this stuff the whole entire time. So I'm happy that we can still continue to do that and have our opportunities to speak to our readership, because, again, they can get it from anywhere else, and yet they still come back to us. So we need to be on the ground in order to tell this story for our readership.
Yeah, and I want to bring it back to Brandon for a moment, because Brandon, there's also the Trump factor. Trump really hasn't been on the ground. He endorsed Herschel Walker before, and I mean, he endorsed him again, but he really hasn't been a major player on the ground. Is that going to help or hurt Herschel Walker when it comes to Trump's support for him at this stage of the race?
So two things. One, and that's a great question. When you look at the Trump factor,
I'm glad it was.
No. Both Trump and Biden have a very unique perspective in these races. Both are not very popular amongst the general public. And recently, with Trump's comments on the Constitution, again, it comes back to what voter is going to decide to stay home. When you look at white male voters in Georgia, in the Bible Belt, and you have a former president who says essentially that we should rip up the Constitution, that's not very popular for a guy running for the Senate to go to Washington. On the flip side to that, when you're talking about a candidate who a state that is a gun supporting state, where now you're talking about, in some cases, gun control. Some voters don't want to hear that in Georgia. And so, again, it's going to be interesting to see, based on you have two national presidents who both have their own issues. You have two Senate candidates that are backing both of these candidates, two African-American candidates at that. That's the bottom. The determining factor is going to be with what voter group is going to stay home. Now, to Warnock's, to his opportunity, with the president's comments recently, that didn't fare over too well with Republicans. So it's going to be very interesting to say if Republicans still turn out in this election, or again, are we going to see some Republicans stay home like they did in some cases with the midterms?
And then also to that point, I want to get how does this night turn out if either one of the candidates win or lose? Right now, the makeup of the Senate, Democrats lead. Essentially, you are talking about a tie in the Senate, but right now, Democrats still have that edge. If Herschel Walker wins, you basically do have that tie. But if you have Raphael Warnock who wins tonight, you basically have Democrats who have that edge up by one Democrat lead in the Senate. So, Brandon, from your perspective, does this help or hurt Biden's agenda over the next 2 years, depending on the results of tonight's election in Georgia?
If Senator Warnock wins, it definitely seals the president's agenda, because you have certain senators, Democratic senators, I might add, like Joe Manchin, who have now shown that they are not necessarily in support of the Biden administration's policies. So this is an important election for Democrats. But on the Republican side, if Herschel Walker is able to pull this off, this not only creates a narrative, but now, and I'll go a step further, this now gets into the 2024 election, because you're going to see a major push to say it's time for a Republican president. So it's very interesting to see how both outcomes are going to have short-term and long-term effects. But I would say if Warnock is able to win tonight, then it helps the Biden agenda with his policy on those Democrats like Joe Manchin, who have shown that they've kind of went, either side. If Herschel Walker wins this reignites the base of Republicans, and this really gives whoever the 2024 candidate a real shot at funding, at resources, and it essentially rebuilds the base.
Yeah. We're going to get back to AR again, who's on the ground, because it looks like the crowd is starting to fill up behind you there. But if you're just tuning in, thanks so much for joining us. I'm digital anchor Andre Ash here at our Real Times Media headquarters. You are watching our special All Eyes on Georgia election night coverage. We're going live right now, back on the ground, to AR Shaw. He is our executive editor of Atlanta Daily World. We got you covered. AR, what's the scene behind you? What's the mood again? I see some people kind of strangling in a little bit behind you, and any celebrities there?
Yeah, like I said, so far we have Spike Lee is running around here somewhere. I saw him earlier. I'm going to try to catch up with him at some point. But right now I'm back close to the media quarters. They're still letting people in. I said, of course, like the line is long as far as the security line. They're making sure that they're checking everyone who comes through the doors. But like I said, in 20 to 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, this is going to be a packed crowd, a packed room. They have a DJ, and it's just a great mood down there. I think, like I said, I think that people, in Warnock's camp, they're very confident about tonight. They really feel that the only reason why we're in this place is because, as Adrian mentioned earlier, the voter rule, the Georgia rule, where you have to have more than 51% of the vote to win a Georgia election. So I just think, before this night is called, I think it's definitely going to go in Warnock's favor. It definitely seems like this is what the mood is. It just feels like this is Warnock's night. So that's what's happening right now on the ground. I'm going to try to get someone to speak once they allow more people to come in. We're going to get someone to give some commentary. So just hold tight.
All right, sounds good. Thanks so much, AR. I'm going to hit it right back over to Donnell, who joins you from across the room somewhere from the Warnock headquarters. And Donnell, what has been, you've been covering this race throughout the past few months or so. What have you been watching as far as what Black people have had to say on the ground, certainly being from the Atlanta Voice? What has been the voice of the people down in Georgia?
Well, having covered Warnock from start to finish and Walker in pieces because he's not inviting media to almost anything anymore, the vibe around the Warnock campaign is familial. It feels like it's every time you come around, it's a barbecue, it's a party, it's a family reunion. Whereas when I used to go out to Walker events in far south or northeast Georgia, it felt more like black Georgians weren't really necessarily welcome. No one told me that, no one said that, but that's how it felt. So if the larger counties like Fulton and DeKalb and Cobb come through for Warnock again, then we're out of here at a decent hour and he's back in the Senate for 6 years. Because that's the vibe I'm getting, that Black Georgia is trying to support this senator and lift him back up in D.C.
And then there was also in Georgia the run for governorship, Stacey Abrams. What has her presence been like on the ground in Atlanta for people who are watching all across the country? We know that she lost that race, but what has been her presence or not when it comes to her support for Warnock and providing him some type of edge or on the ground support or energy for his campaign?
Well, that level of support must be private because it's not public. After she lost, she pretty much went on the ground per se and really hasn't been out on campaign trails and things like that. Again, it was a massive amount of support for the primary. They campaigned a number of times together and always spoke highly of each other. When President Obama came the first time in College Park, all three of them were on stage at one point. Super supportive. So Stacey Abrams people feel like Warnock people anyway. So she doesn't have to come out this last 5-6 days, the last 2 weeks, and really say the same thing she was saying for months leading up to the primary. So I haven't seen her on the campaign trail, but she doesn't need to. I think her people are the people that was going with Warnock anyway.
Brandon, what's your reaction to that and Stacey Abrams? She's gone quiet after her election loss, but does her presence or not impact this race and what, in terms of what type of support she could have lended more openly towards Warnock in this runoff election?
Well, I think that's irrelevant. I don't think that Stacey Abrams' presence hurts or helps Warnock. Again, I actually agree with Donnell. More than likely, the people who are voted for Stacey Abrams are probably going to vote for Warnock. And she lost her race, and he's, running for his own race. But Donnell said something very interesting that I think is important here is when you look at the different dynamics of the Warnock race versus the Walker race. In some cases, you got a pastor running against an NFL Hall of Famer. But you have someone who has been very open and public about their campaign, and you have someone who has, apparently to reports, has not. I think that is a challenge for the Walker campaign. It should have been not only more public, but I also think that it creates an opportunity where you have two African Americans running for senator, of Georgia. And I think that Georgians deserved to hear, not only from a marketing standpoint, but also from a campaign standpoint. I see you don't even have anyone at the Walker campaign now. And so it's things like that bite into campaign elections. They can be the difference in a candidate going to Washington or a candidate losing and staying home. And so I think that was very telling of the difference in approach of one was, really kind of embracing community. One appeared to be more focusing on the issues and going after, the law enforcement vote and more of the senior citizen vote. So it's an interesting dynamic. And I think that what's interesting with the Walker campaign is the fact that you guys don't have someone there. I would be very curious myself to hear from someone at that campaign headquarters what their perspective is from tonight, because I think you'll get a very different perspective than what you saw over at the Warnock side.
Yeah, and right now there's already about 55% of the early vote. The early vote is already expected to be about 55%. And right now, the estimated vote count for Warnock is at 539,822 votes compared to Herschel Walker at 435,004 votes. That is the projected count that's coming in right now from some of those early votes. So, and then there's the 2 million mark vote of people who have early voted right now. So that's the lay of the land we are right now, with 35% that is projected to have already voted. That number's 2 million. That's a record-setting number that we are looking at. We're going to continue our coverage for a few more minutes here as we go into the night. We're going to watch these election results numbers, and then we'll have complete coverage for you on our website at AtlantaDailyWorld.com. Of course, on all of our Real Times media outlets, first thing tonight and first thing in the morning as well, because as Donnell said, you hope that this election and the numbers doesn't spew into the early morning hours, but who knows? Everything has been record-breaking or record-setting, and so has this early vote number that has been record-setting as well. Let's get to Donnell again, because Donnell, I want for you to give us some perspective into what that last election was, what it was like back in November when, the total votes really still hadn't come in yet.
Piggybacking on the numbers you just gave, last time around during the primary, numbers came in like that, and Reverend Warnock was up by 150,000 votes, and everyone was like, wow, okay, cool. And what you don't understand is in Georgia, the smaller counties take a long time. It's not a lot of people. They just don't turn in their numbers until they have to. So polls close at 7. They might not turn the numbers in until 9 o'clock. So Herschel Walker swept all those southern Georgia counties, all of them. So 110,000 votes can really be sucked up fast when you're doing 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 at a time. And that's what we did last time. We were all in here about 9 o'clock thinking, cool, this is going in that direction. Let's start writing our stories. And a lot of that stuff had to shift, because here comes 15,000, 20,000, 30,000 votes trickling in from these smaller counties, way up north in Georgia and way south. So those numbers, to be honest with you, at this point, don't mean a thing, because we got to wait for all the small counties to kick in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because from this perspective, when the polls have just closed at 7 o'clock, so there's still a lot of numbers to come in. You got Warnock leading at 51% compared to actually that's Warnock leading at 55% compared to Herschel Walker at 45%. So we're talking about a difference of 10 percentage points with the relatively low percentage number of votes that have come in yet so far. A lot of people have voted same day, but them early votes have really been record-breaking. 2 million. And like Adrian talked about earlier, she brought the history of the racist tactic that this was used in Georgia, where people had to come back out again and vote if they didn't get the 50% mark vote the first time around, the narrative was hoping that African Americans wouldn't have the wherewithal or the the urgency or to go back out and vote a second time, diluting or suppressing that black vote from coming back out. But it seems as if no matter if this was a runoff, as it has been before, people are definitely making their voices heard in this runoff election.
You have a lot of votes to count. Georgia from all the way up north to the Tennessee line, all the way down to the Florida line. They're all voting for the most part. So there's no way to even tell which direction this thing is going in for another couple of hours. I'm just hoping it's not 2 in the morning, but it's definitely got to be a little later than this.
You know, Andre, it's interesting because when we look at the way the votes go, if they're going west or they're starting east and going west, you're talking about going from the most liberal side of the state, the Atlantas, closer to Nashville, or at least the border in Tennessee's, to going east, where now you're talking about going towards Savannah, Augusta, Macon, and all these other towns that, again, may not necessarily be pleased with the way that America is going. So it's very interesting that when you talk about the numbers being counted, I agree. I would not put any, in the terms of baby respect on those numbers until at least midnight, just because I think you'll get a much better rating of how the numbers are going to go, because literally it can change at the drop of a dime depending on which counties are counting, where the counties are being counted, where the votes are being counted, etc.
We're gonna get to A.R. Shaw in just a moment. We have him on standby. A.R., we see that you got someone standing very close beside you, and so we're gonna head to A.R. on the ground from the election headquarters of Senator Warnock.
So yeah, I'm here with a supporter of Warnock. I want you to just introduce yourself. Just give us your thoughts on what's going on tonight.
Hey, AR, just
Jared McKinley.
one more. AR, if you, AR,
Hold on 1 second. Go ahead.
AR, yeah, if you can, we're gonna come back to you in 5 seconds. If you can just clear your screen for us a little bit.
Hold on 1 second.
I know it's live, so we want to make sure we got the best quality, and so there you go. I think you just needed to clear your screen a little bit. Yeah, let's clean it off just a little bit for us.
Okay, we just gotta roll with it. So just introduce yourself, and we'll let you go. All right.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jared McKinley. I'm the district director for Congresswoman Nikema Williams. We're here to celebrate. Deep in our hearts, we know that this is going to end up the way we need it to end up. We are excited about how many people thoroughly voted. I want to hear it for Rockdale County. I want to hear it for Fulton County. I want to hear it for Atlanta. I mean, we did amazing things to just get out and represent our voice. We know our voice is our vote, and we used it, and we're going to see the results. So, thank you, everybody.
So, what do you think is the mood tonight? What do you like? Do you think this is going to be? What's your prediction?
I got you. The mood tonight is obviously excitement. It is raining outside, but yet this line is around the block. So that tells you everything. It's excitement. It's enthusiasm. We know that this is going to be amazing for women's rights. It's going to be amazing for voters' rights. This is the way that it should turn out, and we are excited.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So as you can see, the line is like around the corner. Like, these are people waiting to get in through the security line. We're not. This is just just lets you know the enthusiasm, the spirit. I think Warnock campus, they really feel excited about tonight. And I think it's going to be, like I said, it's just going to be a victory. So as you can see, these are people waiting to get inside into security. So that lets you know the mood of what's happening right here at the ground at the Warnock campus.
And those people are in a hotel or conference center waiting to get inside the main area of the celebration for his campaign?
Yeah, this is a security line, so they have to, as you can see behind me, this is security. So they have to basically, if you want to get in, you have to get checked through security. And this is the line. It's like pretty much, I'm not sure if you can see, but that's how long the line is. It's like it kind of wraps around, and so it's like it's probably hundreds of people waiting to get in right now.
All right. A.R. Shaw, our executive editor for the Atlanta Daily World. We'll come back to you one more time before we wrap up the broadcast. But, you know, Brandon, I'm thinking, like, did you see there seemed to be a bit of energy on both sides for both camps, right? But are you impressed or satisfied with the performance of what the Republicans have presented in their candidate for Herschel Walker? Are you impressed with his performance?
Well, I will say this: there was, if I were advising Herschel Walker, there were a lot of things that I would have done very differently. The first thing is I think early on, the Trump factor was not a positive, just based on some of the comments that the former president had made, and especially now that you even had some of the Republicans in Georgia that were saying, "Hey, they did not want the president involved in this campaign." I think that was the first thing. The other thing is, I would have thought that, being that this is an NFL Hall of Famer, there would have been more of a push in the Atlanta area versus as opposed to outside Georgia. Now we know the various counties they vote. That is how candidates in Georgia on a statewide level are successful. But I think the messaging matters when we're talking about two African American candidates running with two very different perspectives. One on really kind of continuing what the Biden administration is doing as far as policy wise. The other on a very different perspective, really talking about safety and the economy. And so I would have thought I would have heard more on the economy, more on economic issues as an African American candidate. That would have been more of my approach if I was advising or consulting Mr. Walker.
And right now we're looking at the race right now with Warnock leading at 56% and against Herschel Walker at 43%. That's 38% of the vote that's coming in right now. So again, we'll go through those numbers once again. We're talking Warnock leading at 56% of the vote against Herschel Walker at 43%, and that's with 38% of the votes that have come in so far. As we wrap up our hour of coverage, again, you are watching our election night, All Eyes on Georgia coverage presented to you by Real Times Media and our partnership with the Atlanta Voice and its editor-in-chief, Donnell Suggs, who joins us right now. As a final recap, as far as what you're seeing on the ground, and have you ever seen a race like this before, as far as the dynamics, especially when we talk about Black men from both political parties who are being who are being put in this ring together?
Well, it's unprecedented that two Black men are running for a Senate seat in the state of Georgia.
Right.
It's unprecedented. So we don't need to go into if I've ever seen anything. I'm 45 years old, and someone was 95 years old that didn't see it. So none of us have seen it. It's unfortunate that it's two brothers running, and it doesn't seem like it's two brothers running. And that's my opinion. That's not the opinion of Real Times Media or anybody else. It's my opinion. I just don't feel like it's really two Black guys running against each other. I think it's more like a former football player who's very popular in Georgia because, like Brandon said, football and religion and guns, and that's it. So he happens to be a big name, but I don't know how we got here. I don't know how we got here to where we got to run up with someone that was a sitting senator versus someone that's never really even spoken in public before. At least not politically, but we're here now. So no, I haven't seen anything like this before. And the runoff is unprecedented. And here we are again. We're going to close this out tonight one way or the other. So history will be made either way.
That's for sure. Brandon, your final thoughts as we push into the second hour, at least an hour since polls have closed, but now we're moving to the 8 o'clock hour. And as it stands right now, Herschel Walker is behind in this race with 38% of the votes coming in. There's still a lot of more votes to come in and to be counted. But sure, as we are talking about 1 hour since this, since the polls have closed at 7 p.m., where we are right now, where this race could go, and how it shapes the future of Biden's his governance and having to work with the makeup of the Senate. it all comes down to all eyes being on Georgia tonight.
Mm-hmm. There's two perspectives here. One, if Senator Warnock wins this, he has to have an economic plan for Georgians, and he's got to roll it out. He's got to speak directly to Georgia voters who feel like their country, in some cases, is not what it was 4 years ago, who feel like they've lost their jobs and the government doesn't care. He's got to push a serious economic agenda, and more so to the counties outside of Atlanta. If you're Walker, you actually have to do the opposite. You've got to push an economic agenda, but really one that empowers not only economics, but women. We see Black women are some of the highest entrepreneurs around the country. He's got to rebuild that bridge with female voters in Georgia, specifically in the Atlanta region. And so they both have very interesting dues. But my thoughts are whoever wins this race, day one, they've got to start building, because what we're seeing is that this is not a race in favor of Democrats versus Republicans. Tonight's decision will be made by independent voters.
Wow. And we're hoping to get final thoughts from what's on the ground and from the Warnock campaign with our executive editor, A.R. Shaw from the Atlanta Daily World. All eyes, again, this is our special All Eyes on Georgia election night coverage. That line again you were showing us, AR, and I think you're going out just a little bit, but if you can still hear me as we wrap up this hour, since the polls have closed, what is it that what do you think is going to be on the headline for late tonight, maybe early tomorrow morning, first thing in the Atlanta Daily World? Let's get your mic on for a second.
They're turning into a party right now. As you can hear in the background. I think tomorrow the headline is going to be Warnock. Definitely, he's going to maintain his Senate seat. But I think what's going to happen is he's going to have to point fingers at the Republican Party, because what they did to Herschel Walker was, to me, straight cruelty. They know that he was unprepared. They know that he was someone who wasn't a candidate, an upstanding candidate, and they put him out there. They basically sacrificed him for that Senate seat. And I think the Republican Party are going to have to actually look within themselves and actually ask questions about, who are they actually putting out to represent their party. And I think Herschel Walker was basically the worst choice that you could actually find to represent your party. And I think that's what's going to be the headline tomorrow morning.
And for both you, AR, and Donnell, let's just get a behind the scenes visual look at what's happening on the ground as we just try to gain some perspective. And I know we lost AR for a quick second there, but let's just get some, what are we looking at? I know there's a lot of media from around the country who are following this race. So let's get a look at what the energy in the room and who's there and what's on the ground as people are watching this race. I mean, I know there's a lot of media presence across Georgia tonight. Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any reputable media in this country that isn't here tonight. And it's because you're right. All eyes are on Georgia. So they all have to be in this room tonight, because the Walker campaign is only inviting Fox News and selected people, because he's not taking any questions from anybody. So everybody has to be here.
Yeah, same thing, AR. The visuals of who's there and just how important this race is. You have media from everywhere. You're bringing us that behind the scenes look. Yeah, and I don't think you can hear us, but you're bringing us that background. I think we're losing AR just a little bit, but AR was too on the ground, as well as Donnell, bringing us that behind the scenes visual of how important this moment is, how important this night is, as all eyes is on Georgia. And you can see the reflection of the cameras and the media from all over who are covering this race as well. And because of the hectic situation and the coverage, there is going to be some technical difficulties. I know AR is kind of going in and out a little bit, but we appreciate you for joining us. AR Shaw is our executive editor for the Atlanta Daily World. You can catch his stories anytime, 24/7 at AtlantaDailyWorld.com, our sister outlet here with Real Times Media. And I'm sure you'll have your story first thing up late tonight, or however late or early The night carries you, AR. All right, appreciate the time. Same thing, Donnell. Donnell Suggs, the editor-in-chief of the Atlanta Voice. We appreciate you joining us to do this partnership once again.
Yes, I'll see you guys, like Brandon said, well after midnight.
Well, after midnight. Brandon, we appreciate you joining us as well, conservative commentator and host of the Bryce is Right show. Thank you so much for watching our special All Eyes on Georgia election night coverage brought to you by Real Times Media. You can catch our full story on tonight's election and where this race shapes up. The full story first thing tonight or early tomorrow morning at AtlantaDailyWorld.com. I'm digital anchor Andre Ash. Have a good night, everybody. We'll be following the results throughout the night.